Hey everybody, MichaelBtheGameGenie here, and today we're going to be talking about one-hit wonders on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Goodbye.
That's right guys, a brand new video talking about one-hit wonders on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Is it a brand new video, or is it really for the first time I'm actually doing a sequel to the video I just finished? That's the funny thing. A lot of people ask me why certain games weren't included, and I mentioned in the last video I had a very specific reason for picking the games that I picked. I picked games that had another sequel on the NES, but just didn't have a sequel on the Super Nintendo. So here we are. The games that I'm going to be covering today are games that didn't have a sequel on the Super Nintendo, but they also just never had a sequel, which is surprising because they're all such amazing games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. I mean, some of you are going to see these, and when you go through this video, you'll understand. You'll be like, I mentioned that to him for the last video. That's a game he should have included. Here it is, a one-hit wonder. Now, specifically what I'm going with, sometimes a one-hit wonder could be considered only one game in the series was good. I'm not really going that way. My idea of a one-hit wonder is basically this was an excellent, amazing game on the Nintendo Entertainment System that just never got another sequel anywhere else. And there's some games that may have had an arcade port somewhere else that was either before or afterwards, but I don't really count that as another game. I'm specifically talking about home console releases or really continuation of the original game or series. Anyways, here's the first game.
Bucky OHare is easily one of the very best games on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and that is why it is simply so perplexing that there was ever only one of these games made for the NES, and never another game afterwards. Konami during this period on the NES were interested in branching out and were looking to make some licensed games like their rivals over at Capcom, so they took a chance on some fledgling properties such as Monster in My Pocket, and of course Bucky OHare, and we as video game enthusiasts are also very fortunate that they did. Where do I even start explaining how good Bucky OHare is? Well, let's start with the gameplay, and the first thing that anyone will say is that it's a Mega Man clone. I don't think so, as while it's a side-scrolling action platformer with a gun-type weapon, it is so much more than that. You start the game with only Bucky OHare as a playable character, and he can shoot in multiple directions as well as charge his weapon to do a power jump. After you beat one of the introductory stages, you rescue one of your teammates, who then becomes a playable character, who you can switch back and forth between mid-level. Well, your teammates also have different abilities that are essential in progressing through the levels, which puts an interesting twist on the switching characters mechanic. The game's difficulty is also hard to explain, as let's make no mistake, this is a hard game. Really hard, but it's also the kind of hard that keeps you coming back for more. This is due to two main factors. Number one is that there are unlimited continues, which I believe makes almost any game beatable, and especially with a little time and effort, but even better than that is the way the levels are designed in mini sections, or acts, keeps you starting off pretty much exactly where you died, and there isn't a ton of backtracking. The second is the controls and level design are masterful, and if you die, it's because you did something wrong, or just haven't learned the intricacies of the level yet. Nothing cheap here, just a well-controlled, lightning-fast game that will keep you on your toes. Lastly, I just want to take a second to fawn over the music. Man, Konami and the NES were a dream combination when it came to NES music. Unfortunately, this was the only home console game we ever got from Bucky OHare, which is a shame that there was never any continuation to this masterpiece. While some games we were going to talk about didn't get a sequel because of possible low sales, this one is a little more complicated, where it was a licensed property that also completely disappeared off the map at around the same time. I mean, I briefly remember the cartoon being on YTV here in Canada, and I remember the toys released by Hasbro the most, because they reminded me so much of the TMNT toys for some reason, but it just disappeared as quick as it popped up, it seemed. No source material, and I guess Konami decided to not explore making any future releases for a dead property. Too bad for us, because this was a very special game, and could have been a classic video game series, if continued. If you were a fan of the wacky and fun top-down action RPGs on the Super Nintendo but haven't tried Crystallis yet, I have to tell you, you are in for a treat. Honestly, in my opinion, Crystallis is easily one of the most overlooked properties on the NES, and I can't quite understand why. I mean, the logo is just incredible and immediately makes me think iconic franchise, but sadly, it's the only release in the series. The game should arguably be held in the same breath as The Legend of Zelda or Final Fantasy, but yet here we are talking about a one and done game that just isn't fair. There are a lot of reasons that I think Crystallis maybe wasn't for everybody and was overlooked back when it was released. One reason has to be the box art. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, they absolutely nailed the logo, but the box art does not inspire confidence in my opinion. Bad art of a kid in the woods, kinda just trudging around. I mean, it's fine, but looking back, knowing what happened with the series, heck, if they left the box basic white with just the logo, it probably would have done better. Second is that it wasn't your typical adventure story. Instead of a knight trying to save the princess, and by doing so, the world, you are a cryogenically frozen scientist who awakens 100 years in the future in a post-apocalyptic world to discover that science and magic have been combined, and you must seek out the 4 elemental swords and combine them to form Crystallis. I mean, I think that sounds awesome, but I guess for a kid, it just sounds kinda stupid? I don't know. The gameplay can be a little off-putting starting out for a kid as well, as it's one of those games that really slows you down before you can really get into the thick of it. Let's be clear, this is one of those games where you will get lost and have no idea what to do. I mean, if you miss a verbal cue from an NPC, good luck, and I hope you have Nintendo Power or a walkthrough nearby. So you blindly make your way through the first town and speak to the Elder who bestows upon you the Sword of Wind, and lets you finally take on the enemies of the game. You can also buy some gear with the $100 provided to you in the town, but that will only get you your armor. When you get out onto the overworld, you will find your attack weak and hard to make contact, but hold down the attack button to charge and discover your projectile weapon, which makes the game so much more enjoyable. In order to progress easier, you really need to level, and this slows the game down to a screeching halt right off the start. You don't need to, kinda. If you didn't buy the armor and have money left to buy the alarm whistle, you can progress. But I really advise it, as you level up your health and attack increases, as well as the extra armor you can buy with all the money you collect doesn't hurt, and will make the game's dungeons ahead much less challenging. But there were some kids that would be turned off by this immediately. Crystallis was highly praised by critics upon its release for its beautiful graphics, great music, and really interesting plot, but that unfortunately did not translate into a commercial success. Because of this, it was a one and done on the Nintendo Entertainment System. It did, however, eventually become a cult classic years later, which led to a re-release on the Game Boy Color. Unfortunately, this game took several liberties with the original and even alienated longtime fans, confirming the series' demise. I still held out hope that the series can be brought back. This was easily the most requested game on my last video for NES games with no Super Nintendo sequel. Shatterhand is considered by many to be a hidden gem on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and I can most certainly see why, because it wasn't until I was an adult that I had even heard of it. And while people are absolutely crazy about it, I think it's really good, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a favorite of mine. Shatterhand, of course, is from the wonderful people at Natsume, who made some of the very best games on the NES later in the system's life. It is like they said, how pretty and detailed can we make these characters and levels, and then still win a step above. Pair that with the solid controls and excellent level design, and yeah, it's a great game. I think Shatterhand is absolutely awesome, but I just haven't gotten very far in it yet, and maybe it's that reason why I don't hold it higher on my personal list. The game is a challenging side-scrolling action platformer where you have lost your arms and they have been replaced by bionic ones, and you are renamed Shatterhand. Okay, so that is freaking awesome, and already winning me over again. I find the combat satisfying but hard to get in close to enemies to make contact. You can also get a familiar to aid you in combat by collecting 3 symbols throughout the stages. With each combination, the familiar will change its attacks, so use what you find fits you or the situation best. You can also increase your power and refill your life throughout the stage at one of the designated kiosks, provided you have money to do so. This is actually refreshing, as usually the cash you collect in a game like this is worthless and just gives you points that serve no purpose, but this adds an interesting element to collecting in the game. You start out on a default stage that is extremely fun and gives a great representation of what's to come in the game, and then you get a level select screen to choose which level you will tackle next. I'm not sure if people are simple enough to consider a level select screen in a side-scrolling action platformer enough for a game to be considered a Mega Man clone, but I could be wrong. Also, let's just take a minute to talk about the visuals in this game, and especially the level select screen. This is awesome. I will admit I have just never given it the time it deserves to get better at it and see more of the game, but it has everything I like in an NES game, and I think it had a crazy amount of potential to expand on what was delivered here in the first game. Unfortunately, it was one of those NES games that was released later in the console's life, and after the Super Nintendo had reached North America, and it was fighting an uphill battle to get noticed. Like I mentioned earlier, I never even knew about Shatterhand until I was an adult, and I was one of the more devoted video game kids, so I'm sure that a lot of people missed this one originally, and it performed poorly in the home markets, which led to the death of the series, and we only got one very special game on the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Okay guys, those are just some games that I think are one-hit wonders on the NES. I know that immediately you guys are thinking, oh, there's so many more. I know. While I was actually capturing the footage for this video, the game footage, I was thinking, you know what, I should have took this one out and included this one. That's the beauty of this thing. I only include three video games each time. So there's always room to make another video. So if there's something that you think that I missed out that was an amazing game on the NES that definitely should be included in my next video talking about it being a one-hit wonder and never getting a sequel or another release, let me know in the comments down below. And of course, you know, the great thing about this is one of the games specifically, I picked Crystallis. It's going to be included on the upcoming SNK Anniversary Collection on the Switch. And I know that there was a fan-made sequel out there, so it'd be amazing to see a new Crystallis game, you know, for the Switch. I talked about this in the last video. The modern-day, updated, I don't know what you call them, 8-bit style games or retro-modernized games. We may finally get sequels to this, and this video could be invalid in a couple months or a couple years. Who knows? But as of right now, none of these games had sequels, so when you're thinking about what games you suggest I should cover next time, think about ones that never got a sequel and definitely didn't get a future follow-up. Yeah, so that's that. Anyways, before I go, I just wanted to take a quick minute. I just hit 20,000 subscribers. I talked about this way back in, I think it was my Games Better on the Genesis than on the Super Nintendo video, that I was striving to hit 20,000 subscribers by the end of the summer. And thank you everybody for all your amazing support. The past 2.5, 3 months on YouTube have been the best for me in well over, 2-3 years. I had a lot of stuff come in my life and I almost went away from YouTube, and the way YouTube works now is it's really hard for you just to post a video and get people to watch it. So, if you're not posting regularly or you're posting stuff that's not as successful, I guess sometimes it dips down, but I feel so humbled by all the support I've received recently and people watching the videos, commenting, communicating with me. It really means a lot, guys, and I really appreciate it. So I just want to say thank you so much, getting me to 20,000 subscribers, 2 million views, and I feel motivated, I feel invigorated, I'm having fun doing this, and I want to keep doing it. So I'm going to do my best. I'm a busy guy, new dad, I got a busy job and a busy life, but I try my best to do this every 2 weeks, and I'm motivated and happy, so it's fun to do, and I really don't mind putting the time in when things are going so well like this. So just thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Anyways, I'll stop babbling, and that's it for this week. I look forward to your response. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time, and I promise, I've been doing a lot with sequels lately. It's been all about sequels. A lot of stuff with the NES too. We're going to try something different in the next video. In fact, this will be a follow-up to a video I did probably about 7 weeks ago. So, see you in 2 weeks. Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey there! Thank you for making it to the very end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, why don't you check out one of the other videos shown here? If you really enjoyed the video, you can even subscribe to my YouTube channel. And of course, if you really enjoyed the video, feel free to check out my Patreon. It would be appreciated.